Hey guys, today I just wanted to share with you some of my thoughts about NAMM this year. So if you're not familiar, NAMM is actually a music technology trade show that happens in California every year. And all the big company giants and the small guys actually also go and they showcase their products, some of their software, their developments. So I just wanted to share with you some of the things I saw, some of the things I'm interested in, and especially when it comes to the world of electronic music tech. So I won't be talking about like guitars and amps and things like that. So let's get started. So first off, we have an interesting product from Elektron. So you might be familiar with Elektron. They make things like the octatrack, the analog keys, the analog rhythm. So this year they got this one called the DIGITAKT. That one is, again, kind of like in the same boat. So it's a sequencer sampler kind of machine. So you'll be able to make whole tracks on this presumably. But at this point, it's still very early in development. So they had it, they had a physical device there, but it was all covered in plastic, so no one can get really close to it or play it. Not even the show like product presentators. So that was interesting, but we'll hear more about that later this year. It seems really interesting though, because Elektron has always been known for making, kind of high-end, higher end gear for electronic musicians. So generally like a lot of sequencers, samplers, things like that. And now they've kind of made this one, which is going to be significantly less, so it's going to be an easier kind of barrier of entry point for, musicians maybe on a more sensible budget, or maybe just not really interested in getting such a big setup like the octatrack. So this one, again, we'll see how it goes. There's a lot of potential in it. It just looks like it's mainly digital sampling, which is fine, with lots of digital filters and whatnot. But what's interesting is that there is a storage right on board. So they say that it has 1 GB of storage. So this can presumably be all your personal samples, things that you've sampled into it, things that you've collected over the years, and now you can actually make music with it as if it was a computer itself, but it's, a little hardware box. So that's pretty cool. Next up though, there is a new synth by DREADBOX. So this one is called the Abyss, and it will be a 4-voice polyphonic synthesizer. Now this is awesome because, in the last year or so, we've also seen quite a stir about polyphonic analog synthesizers. We've had the Korg Minilog, we've had the Behringer DeepMind. So it's definitely kind of a trend to start making these poly analog synths. However, the DREADBOX is a kind of self-contained sound module instead of a full keyboard. So this one's, I don't know, it does have an interesting format. It's got some great sound shaping capabilities and timbres. Not to mention it's got onboard like delay and flanger and chorus. So the way they've just put it all together, the way they've wired it up, it just sounds pretty incredible. So I'm very excited for it. It's definitely more of a little premium synth. But DREADBOX does have quite a, they have quite a reputation for good sound. And then finally, I just wanted to bring up the one thing that stole the attention of everyone at the show today. It is the Akai MPCs. So we have the 2 new MPC lines that Akai has been pushing now. And basically they are actually standalone hardware devices. So they have a built-in computer. It's a Linux-based computer. So the software inside it is actually optimized to run perfectly smooth and everything, so there's not going to be kind of like those traditional, software crashes because you had some odd component in your computer. Maybe there's like a hardware driver problem. None of that. Is just going to work really well. This reliability should be especially good for live performers or just, musicians in the studio that are just tired of that kind of, incompatibility issues or like crash bugs and things like that. Not saying that this will be 100% perfect, but it should be a significant upgrade. So a little bit of the MPCs, if you don't know already, MPCs go way back. They've been kind of known as the top dog sampler sequencers. Big hip hop guys have been using it for years, but also in other genres. And in more recent years, like in 2010 or so, Akai started shifting their attention away from the hardware standalone sampler sequencers, and they started making hardware controllers that you plugged into the computer. Now this is awesome because they could now take advantage of things on the computer that they couldn't do before on the hardware. And now that they've kind of gone through some years of research and development and getting feedback from actual musicians, they've been able to take all this feedback and all this all these results and compile them into MPC 2.0, the software. And now this is integrated into the new MPCs, the MPC Live and the MPC X. So what's even cooler about this is that like the features that it comes with basically are pretty flexible. So regardless of what the kind of equipment that you have in your studio, you can just expect to plug and play really and just get recording. It has an onboard sequencer for audio and I believe for MIDI as well. So it's got lots of inputs for audio, lots of inputs for MIDI. It's got an SD card reader, hard drive that you can swap out yourself. So, you know, there's just a lot of flexibility, which I find really interesting. Though do expect to pay the price of about like a mid-high-end laptop. But honestly, if that's all you need for your music production, this is a pretty good deal. So, I don't want to dwell too much on the NPCs because there's so much to be said about them and there's already so much content about them online. Definitely check out Akai's own website to see the specs and what it all can do, or just check out something like a Sonic States overview with Akai. They actually had one of the guys from them come over and overview the machine, and you'll get a really good feel for what it can do and why it's kind of a big deal that companies are starting to offer such a powerful standalone hardware sequencer, because we've seen things like the circuit, we've seen things like the Korg Electrives, and I feel like, you know, there's definitely a demand for these hardware sequencers, but there's maybe certain tastes that are for different folks. So, you know, maybe this is kind of up your alley. Maybe you're still into the MIDI sequencing that you can get in the Korg Electrives, and that's fine too. And now for some honorable mentions from NAMM this year. First up, I have to give a shout out for Teenage Engineering. They have a new pocket operator, that little calculator type synthesizers. Now this one has some little premium features though, where you can swap out the sounds, whereas before you just couldn't do that with the previous pocket operators. Now they've worked with Microtonic, and you'll be able to swap out the sounds via just a mic input cable. So it's kind of an interesting device on its own, but they also showed off the OPZ. And the OPZ is like the OP1's little brother, except this one, instead of being like a multi-track audio sequencer, it is a multi-track MIDI sequencer with onboard synthesis and all that good stuff from Teenage Engineering. And I'm very excited about this one. It's very odd. It doesn't have a screen. You have to use like an iPad or iPhone or some kind of device to see what's going on inside, but apparently you can still use it without a screen and just kind of, you know, do this blind type of programming and just feel it out. It looks really fascinating, and it has like a video synthesizer essentially. So that it just all looks very interesting to me. So more excited about that one. The OPZ will also be coming out later this year, probably around fall time. So that's cool. Then we have ROLI and their ROLI blocks. So they've announced that they have a new ROLI dashboard for the blocks, which means you can just plug and play your little device now, and it will be compatible with things like Ableton, Cubase, basically all the main DAWs, as well as some big synthesizers like Massive, and there's like Contact, I believe there's some other ones. So the functionality of this with a desktop setup has definitely been significantly increased, and that's awesome to see, because at first, you know, one of the bigger complaints that most people had was that it only worked with the iPhone or the iPad, and you know, most people weren't really interested in that. They wanted to use it with Ableton or a full-out, you know, full-fledged synthesizer. So it's good for them for actually putting this out, you know, fairly early after the release of the blocks, I think. Another interesting release was actually from IRCAM'S from France. So they were showcasing the software tuner called the SNAIL. And I know tuners aren't really the most exciting software utility that you can get, but this one has a very unique interface, and it also tracks not just the fundamental frequency and whether it's in tune or not, but also all the harmonics above it. So you can imagine how this can also be used as a learning tool, whether you're just trying to figure out, you know, how one of your favorite songs works musically. Maybe you're trying to figure out some complex harmonic content in a certain sound that you're trying to sample. It looks very interesting for kind of analysis and again for learning. So I'm very excited about that one. And finally, Korg Gadget for Mac. So I know many of you might not know what Korg Gadget is, but it's actually a little iPad application It's also for iPhone as well, and it basically is a little sequencer. You have little gadgets that you can pull up on here, and they each have a kind of purpose. So you get like a drum machine, you get a bass machine, you get like a melodic machine, an ambient machine, things like that. It's super fun, and a lot of the gadgets sound really great. So many of us have been wanting to use these in, you know, a proper studio setup with a desktop computer, things like that. And the only way to really do that right now, like in the best way, is through a bridge application called Studio Mux, which will send MIDI to your iPad and audio out of it to Ableton or whatever DAW you use. So that's pretty fun. But now we'll be able to actually use proper plugins, you know, less latency, less problems, more stability, and you'll also be getting some new gadgets. So they're announcing that they have some new audio-based gadgets for live looping, so you can use vocals, you can use guitar, you can use pretty much any recordings and just loop them inside Gadget, or you can use the gadget itself maybe inside Ableton and do some more interesting things with it, since they do have some effects for it. So I don't know, I'm pretty excited. It will probably come at a premium price though, because it will be including absolutely every gadget they've released up to date, which means all the in-app purchases that you would normally get on the iPad or iPhone are now going to be bundled for the Mac. So that's exciting. So that's it for me, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully you're a little bit up to date now with what's been going down this weekend at NAMM. I'm very excited to see all this new stuff. It's just like, I don't know, as a kind of music tech geek, I love seeing new innovation coming out. So if I missed anything that you were looking forward to, definitely let me know in the comments. I obviously didn't get to cover absolutely everything. There's just hundreds, if not thousands of new things that have been coming out this year. So let's talk about it in the comments and keep the conversation going. But don't forget to make some music after this.